Mondstadt and Liyue. What do these two have in common apart from a shared border and archons with more hidden secrets than the prophets of Diluc's wine empire? Not a lot. One represents freedom and the other contracts. You cannot get more further apart. However, there is one other interesting thing they do share, and that is the moon. German speakers would know that Mondstadt means moon city. Chinese speakers would know that Liyue means glazed moon. The two original archons, having their realm with names including the moon, does make you wonder about whether there is some hidden meaning behind this. Welcome to Genshin Impact Lost in Translation. In this episode, let's look at names. Names are especially interesting because there can sometimes be multiple meanings depending on the rendition and language used. And as mentioned in both of my previous videos, we all know that names are important to fate. The names related to Liyue and Inazuma tend to hold the most weight in terms of translation because individual Chinese characters and Japanese kanji hold meaning. This extends beyond place names and includes character names and titles too. Today, let's focus on Liyue-related characters. The Adepti are a good example of this. We all know the good old Moon Carver, Mountain Shaper, and Cloud Retainer. These names sound pretty lofty in English, but in Chinese, they carry even more weight. To begin with, their collective title of the Mighty and Illuminated Adepti sounds a lot cooler in Chinese in the first place. 三眼无显仙人. Literally, 3 eyes, 5 manifestations, immortal person. And yes, that does sound weird in English, so I totally understand their localization choices. But I promise it does invite intrigue in both Chinese and Japanese. In the developer insights from way back in 2021, they explain that the 3 eyes refers to the third eye that the Adepti have, which grants them the ability to control elemental energy, the equivalent of a vision that the humans have. Wu Xian refers to a group of deities often paralleled with another group of malevolent deities referred to as Wu Tong, or 5 powers, of which includes people-eating demons called San Xiao, i.e. mountain demon. This is where the character Xiao's name comes from. The developer insights contain a lot more on the naming and design choices made. If you were not into Genshin back then and have never seen this, I highly recommend giving it a read. I've linked both the English and Chinese versions in the description. Anyway, Xianren, which is the part that is localized as Adeptus in-game, is made up of the characters Xian and Person. A Xian refers to an immortal mythical being in Taoism, so is generally translated as immortal in English, though Xianren in general can also be referring to a celestial being, if outside of the Taoist concept. So the Latin-sounding Adepti as a general catch-all term is a fair enough localization choice. Though that totally isn't confusing with the 8 adepts at all, because in Chinese, that is 八旗 and sounds nothing like Xianren. In addition to Xianren, in-game, the term Xiansou is also used. Essentially, if you add a different noun to Xian, then you have a different type of Xian. So Xiansou is what they have localized as illuminated beast. The Xian character overall mostly refers to the Adepti in-game, but is also used for words such as Seelies, which are Xianling. But in this case, this is using the definition of fairy rather than anything to do with Taoism. Rex Lapis, the prime of the Adepti, is Zongxian Zizu, the ancestor of the Adepti. Whether you want to take this literally, or in the sense of founder, adds to the never-ending list of questions we have about his history. Anyhow, back to the names of the Adepti. Let's look at Cloud Retainer to begin with. In Mandarin Chinese, Cloud Retainer is Liu Yun Jiefeng Zhenjun, or Luan Shakafeng Xinkun in Japanese. This name can be broken into 3 parts, and Cloud Retainer only covers the first. Liu is the character for stay or retain. Yun is cloud. This is the same Yun used for her mortal persona Xian Yun, which means leisurely cloud. Jie means to borrow, and Feng is wind. This is the same character used for the element Anemo in-game. Zhenjun means true lord, and is a title used to reflect the Xian's enlightened status and also parallels with Rex Lapis's Dijun title. A Zhenren in Taoism refers to a Taoist spiritual master, essentially someone who has cultivated perfection or become a Xian. In-game, the Adepti fit both of these categories. So altogether, you could interpret this name as something like Cloud Retaining Wind Borrower True Lord. Similarly, Mountain Shaper is Li Sui Diesan Zhenjun. Diesan is fold mountains, ergo mountain shaper, while Li Sui is tidy or order waters. So together that is water tiding mountain folder true lord. Moon carver's Xue Yue Zu Yang is then moon carving sun constructor. Now, this may be a bit of a stretch, but notice how their names have some parallels to elements. Jiefeng, Li Shui, and Zuyang being the clear ones, mirroring the air, water, and fire, i.e., animo, hydro, and pyro. And if the sun represents fire, then the moon would have connotations with ice, so it would be cryo in this case. Diazan could link with the earth and therefore be represented with Geo, but also could be interpreted as Dendro, in which case, since Geo is already prominently representative of Morax, I would go with the latter. The remaining element is Electro. This is the one that doesn't have an obvious mapping, but you could argue that clouds are present when there is lightning, so is covered by Liu Yun. So overall, our always suspicious Lord of Geo has 3 very important adepti who just so happen to have names that cover the remaining 6 elements of the 7 in Tevat. Is this a coincidence? Well, who is to say? I certainly do think that they put some thought into the naming of the adepti, given the importance names have to fate. The Lord of Geo himself, with his numerous aliases, is also a topic of constant debate. His mortal identity, Zhongli, is often interpreted as time of departing, or off the clock, from the characters of time and leave or depart. This is the same Li used in the Guili Plains, Gui Li Yuan, a remnant of the Guili assembly. The Gui is often thought to be taken from the god of dust, Gui Zong. Gui means return or go back. The Zong in Gui Zong is different from the Zong in Zhongli. It means final or end. So put together, you could interpret her name as being one who returns at the end, or alternatively, the end of the return. 2 completely opposite meanings, one positive, the other somewhat tragic. It is arguably a suitable name for a deity of dust, in which everything returns to. You could argue that she was doomed to such an end from her very name to begin with, or, if you want to be an optimist, you could say that it implies she will return at the very end. If we can revive the White Horse Adeptus, we can revive the Lord of Dust. Or maybe that's just pure copium. Anyway, Gui Li together is essentially an oxymoron, to return and to depart. Again, you could read this with the positive or negative spin. A home for those to return to after they depart, or somewhere one will always leave from after returning. It can be somewhat bittersweet too, a continuous cycle of reunions and farewells. And given how it became a casualty of the Arkan War, it is the farewell that stuck. In terms of literary or poetic names, another one of Morax's past identities also invites intrigue. The Moor in Mr. Moor is not the same Moor used for Morax. This Moor means none or not. Essentially, he is calling himself Mr. Nothing or Mr. Nobody. An interesting thing to note is that this is also the same character used for the following expression, 哀莫大于心死, which literally means grief is not bigger than heart's death, and is generally translated as there is nothing worse than, or there is no grief greater than, the death of the mind. Now, doesn't that sound a lot like erosion? Again, you could interpret this in 2 ways. Has this past identity already undergone erosion and he is starting anew, eventually becoming Morax and then Rex Lapis? Or is this foreshadowing millennia into the future to what will happen in the current timeline? With each new title we learn, the more questions are raised. Titles are always interesting to look at, and in combination with names, there are even more things you can learn about a character without even properly meeting them within the plot. The 5 Guardian Yakshas are an example of this. As you may know, Xiao's name Alatus, which is also used in his title, reflects his true form as a bird. The Chinese is Jingpeng, using the characters for gold and the mythical creature Peng. A Peng is a giant bird that transforms from a Kun, which is a mythological sea creature. The Peng has wings that spans the heavens, allowing it to travel mythical distances. Its transformation therefore carries connotations of transcendence and limitless ambition. This Peng has influenced Chinese literature and folklore. In the famous Journey to the West, there is a 大鹏金翅雕, or Great Peng Gold-Winged Eagle, the youngest of 3 demon kings ruling a region near the end of the story. Sun Wukong is unable to defeat the Peng, like he had with his other foes, so he has to ask the Buddha for help. Then it turns out that the Peng counts as part of the Buddha's extended spiritual family, so the Buddha basically decides not to kill him. The Peng realizes that he cannot defeat the Buddha, so ends up submitting and is taken back to the Buddha's realm, under control and restored to a proper place in the Buddhist order. You could say that there are some parallels with Rex Lapis and Xiao's relationship here, where Rex Lapis freed Alatus from his previous master and granted him a new name, symbolic of his freedom. According to the developer insights, Xiao's name of Jingpeng is from Jingci Peng Wang Niao, literally golden-winged Peng King bird, drawing inspiration from the mythological Peng and the Garuda. This is used directly as his constellation in Chinese and in Japanese. Consequently, his English constellation, Alatus Nemeseos, meaning winged and nemesis, as in the goddess of retribution, partially reflects the bird deity and the personification of divine punishment for hubris. The other four of the Guardian Yaksha, on the other hand, have names that are separate from their title. Their titles incorporate animals, similar to how Xiao's does, but their actual names have their own meanings. Let's look at Bosacius first. His name in Chinese is Fu Se, using the characters for float and to give up or house. At the end of the cutscene in the interlude Arkan quest, he says,
我叫辐射，意为浮生一刹，万般皆赦。
which just can't be translated into English with the same sort of impact and as poetic. English uses,
I am Bosacius, and my destiny is to make the ultimate sacrifice.
which is still impressive, but as you can see from the Chinese, this is a clear example of where a character's name and fate is tied. The fleeting life lasts but an instant. All things must be relinquished. Or in simpler terms, life is short, so all mortal attachments must be let go. It is a tragic but beautiful description. Despite the Yakshas having long lifespans compared to mortals, their lives can also be just as short as an instance in comparison to other immortals. Their karmic debt is like a sword of Damocles constantly hanging over their heads, so this phrase is essentially a memento mori. He was a Yaksha, destined to give up everything from this transient life. The other three Yaksha, we do not have full phrases explaining their names. However, even from the two characters alone, there's plenty to infer, and equally with a pessimistic spin depending on your perspective. For instance, Menogius' name is Mi Nu, using the characters for full or fill and anger or rage, so can be interpreted as filled with rage. Given that he eventually succumbed to karmic debt, another reading of this is that he went mad. Bonanas, on the other hand, is called Fa Nan, using the characters for cut down or attack and disaster. So an interpretation is strike down disaster. As it is implied that Menogius and Bonanas killed each other, using their names, the circumstances could be construed as Menogius being the one first to fall victim to karmic debt, and Bonanas the one who had to take him down, but unfortunately also dying in the process. In the same vein, in Darius's name is Yingda, using the characters for answer or respond, and reach or attain, which can be interpreted as reaching the answer, or achieving what should be done or what was deserved. You can argue that this is most straightforwardly reflecting karmic debt, in the sense that one gets what they deserve. If you spend your life killing, you will ultimately lose your own life in an equally horrendous fashion. Overall, it can be seen that the characters who met tragic ends had names that arguably hinted at their demise, whilst for the characters that are still alive, their names can be interpreted in interesting ways. Now, my videos mainly focus on language, so theorizing is not the purpose of these. However, I do have some potentially far-fetched thoughts on some of these names. So, bear with me for a few minutes as we dive into dubious theory territory. Remember how I mentioned about Morax's three main adepti having names that reflect the elements? I would now like to draw attention to the actual pairings of these elements and the connotations the corresponding archons have. Animo and Electro, Hydro and Dendro, Cryo and Pyro, and the Geo of Rex Lapis. What do Barbatos and Baal have in common? Egeria and Ruka Devata, the Tsaritsa and Habarim, and Morax alone? Yes, they're associated links with the aspects of the four shades. We all know about Venti's relation to Istaroth and how Makoto had help from the power of time. Egeria was literally created by Nibirius, and Dendro as an element fundamentally has ties to the concept of life. Irminsul in Chinese is called the World Tree, which is associated with the Tree of Life. The Pyro Archons borrow power from Renova, and it appears that the Tsaritsa has a vendetta against the power of death. And of course, Morax's parallels with Asmodee and his own control over the power of space. Is this truly just a coincidence? Or was Morax trying to replicate some sort of celestial hierarchy when he initially gave the Adepti powers? And just to grasp at straws even further, I would also like to draw your attention to the chess game in the Transcendence trailer. Notice how some of the same element pairs are shown. The Animo and Electronoses, the Geonosis by itself, the Hydro and Dendronoses, then the Cryonosis by itself. There's no Pyronosis visible, but the Cryo one then moves so you can see it together with the Geonosis on the board. And one thing that has been theorized by many people now is Morax's apparent sun connotations. So if one were to go out on a limb and suggest that potentially the contract with the Tsaritsa somehow is able to cover the gap of the missing Pyronosis, would that be too much of a stretch? I will leave that thought with you to ruminate. If you learned something new today, please drop a like. If you found something interesting or have theories of your own, leave a comment down below. As always, wishing you a pleasant day wherever you are, and good luck on your polls.